Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a world where companionship, connection, and belonging are often considered the pillars of happiness. Social media has become a reflection of how our relationships are curated, broadcast, and consumed. And yet, amid all this connectivity, there exists a silent, subtle truth about the nature of friendship, relationships, and, more intriguingly, the solitude of being a woman with no friends. Now, when we hear the phrase "a woman with no friends," the immediate thought may be one of pity, loneliness, or perhaps something akin to a social tragedy. But is it possible that this interpretation is, in fact, an oversimplification of a far deeper and more profound state of being? In modern life, we are conditioned to think of friendships as something we must pursue with urgency, as if they are necessary accessories to the life we ought to be leading. Yet, is there a truth hidden in the woman who walks alone, unburdened by the expectations of others, who chooses solitude over the noise of social exchange? Is she really alone, or is she, in fact, more connected to herself than most of us can ever dream of being? There is a particular kind of freedom that comes from living without the constant need for validation, without the pull of external approval. For this woman, the absence of friends is not an absence at all. It is not a reflection of some deficiency, but rather a choice, a deliberate act of not being swept away by the tides of social obligation. She lives not for others, but for herself. She steps away from the conventional need for constant companionship, finding in her own company an expansive world rich with meaning and depth. But how does one arrive at this state? What is it that enables a woman to stand apart, to distance herself from the conventional pressures of fitting in, and to embrace the world with no need for validation? It is a question worth considering because, in truth, this woman with no friends is far from ordinary. She is a seeker, someone who, rather than looking outward, turns inward, exploring the depths of her own being. On doing so, she has discovered a truth that many of us might never fully comprehend. We are not defined by our relationships with others, but by our relationship with ourselves. Friendship, in its most basic form, is often about connection, about finding someone who understands you, who shares your thoughts, your emotions, your experiences. And yet, when we delve deeper into this idea of connection, we begin to see that it is not always the people around us who make us feel connected. Often, it is our own inner world that is the most authentic, the most unshakable source of understanding. There are moments in life when the external world feels like a mere distraction from the richness that resides within us. In those moments, a woman with no friends is not alone. She is simply deeply attuned to the richness of her inner life. The notion that a woman needs a network of friends to be whole, to be happy, is a social construct, a belief system rooted in cultural conditioning. We have been taught that the value of a person is determined by their social circle, their ability to engage, to belong. But what if the opposite is true? What if the real value lies not in the pursuit of relationships, but in the cultivation of the self? A woman with no friends may have chosen, whether consciously or subconsciously, to stand apart and discover who she is without the filter of others' opinions. She does not need to explain herself. She does not need to apologize for her lack of social engagements. Instead, she chooses to exist in a space where she is free from the constraints that society often places on what it means to be a woman. The pressures to be sociable, to be liked, to be popular. These are external forces that do not define her. The fact that she walks alone is, in many ways, a sign of her strength. For she does not fear the solitude. She embraces it as a necessary companion on the journey of self-discovery. But let us not romanticize this solitude as some idyllic state of constant peace. To live without friends, especially in a society that places such emphasis on social bonds, is not always easy. It requires courage. It requires an understanding of the self that goes beyond surface-level desires and acknowledges the deeper, often uncomfortable truths of existence. A woman without friends must be willing to face the loneliness that inevitably arises, not as a weakness, but as an opportunity for growth. In the absence of external distractions, she is left to confront her own thoughts, her own desires, and her own fears. This, too, is a form of connection, a connection to oneself that can be as fulfilling, if not more so, than any friendship could offer. There is something profoundly liberating about stepping outside the pressures of social norms. The world tells us that we need to fit into a mold, to be a part of something larger, to seek approval, affection, and affirmation from others. The woman who chooses to stand alone does not live according to these expectations. She chooses to define her own life. Her existence is not a reflection of the validation she receives from others, but a manifestation of her own understanding of who she truly is. She is the architect of her own reality. When a woman with no friends chooses solitude, she is not retreating from the world. She is embracing a different kind of relationship with it. She steps out of the roles that society has carved for her. The daughter, the mother, the sister, the friend, and embraces a more profound identity, the individual. She sees that, ultimately. The connections we seek with others are reflections of the connections we first cultivate within ourselves. She learns to be her own friend, to love and accept herself without needing others to mirror that love. In truth, the woman with no friends may, in some ways, be the most connected of us all. She is connected to the universe, to the natural world, to the ebb and flow of life itself. She does not need to be affirmed by others because she already understands her place in the grand scheme of existence. In her solitude, she is free from the noise of external opinions and is able to listen more deeply to the rhythms of her own heart. We must recognize that friendship is not the ultimate goal of life. It is not the end-all, be-all of human existence. It is, in many ways, a distraction, a way of avoiding the more profound questions of our own inner being. The woman with no friends knows that true contentment does not come from external validation, but from the inner peace that arises when we learn to live with ourselves, just as we are, without the need for others to define us. Now, this is not to say that relationships are unimportant. Human connection is vital to our well-being. But the nature of these relationships matters. We must question whether we are seeking out relationships merely as a means of avoiding our own discomfort, or whether we are building genuine, authentic connections that enrich our lives and support our growth. The woman with no friends does not reject relationships. She rejects the idea that friendships must be a requirement for her happiness. She understands that relationships, like all things in life, must come from a place of balance and self-awareness. She recognizes that it is only by truly understanding herself that she can form relationships that are meaningful, that are based on shared values, respect and understanding, rather than social obligations or the desire to avoid solitude. In many ways, the woman with no friends lives a life of choice. She chooses to see herself as whole, as complete, without the need for external validation. She does not seek approval from others because she already knows her worth. She does not need the company of others to feel fulfilled. Instead, she fills her own life with purpose, meaning, and love. Love that is not dependent on anyone else but herself. Her journey is one of self-realization. It is a path that few are willing to take because it requires a willingness to face the unknown, to step into the silence, and to accept the challenges that come with walking alone. But in doing so, she finds something that many will never experience: a deep, unshakable peace that comes from knowing who you are, apart from the labels and expectations imposed by the world. She recognizes that there is no greater companionship than the one that exists within her own soul. The pursuit of external approval, the need to be validated, to be seen and admired by others, are all distractions from the deep, often overlooked truth of human existence. We are born complete, and our lives are a journey of realizing and expressing that complete. For the woman with no friends, life is not defined by the presence or absence of people around her. Instead, it is defined by the clarity with which she perceives herself and the world. There is no anxiety over what others may think of her. She does not measure her worth by the number of social engagements or the frequency with which her phone rings. Her sense of identity does not hang on the approval of others. It is rooted in a more secure foundation, in the recognition of her own value as a unique individual, independent of societal judgments. This freedom, however, comes at a price. To be a woman with no friends is to face the inevitable discomfort, isolation. It is to endure moments of silence where the mind must confront its own thoughts. It is in these quiet moments that many seek distractions, turning to social media or other means to fill the emptiness. But the woman with no friends chooses to sit with that silence. She allows it to speak to her, to guide her, rather than fleeing from it. She understands that the discomfort of isolation is merely the discomfort of confronting one's own truth, of learning to sit in the fullness of who we are without the need for external affirmation. In our world, loneliness is often viewed as a deficiency, something to be feared and avoided at all costs. But the woman with no friends knows that loneliness is not an enemy to be feared. It is a companion in disguise. In the silence, she hears the deeper rhythms of life, the truth of her own being. This is a radical act in a society that tells us we must always be surrounded by others. But there is a profound power in being alone, in choosing solitude not as a consequence of rejection, but as a conscious, empowered decision to listen to the song of your own soul. This is where the woman with no friends finds her power. She does not feel diminished by her lack of social interactions. She does not measure her worth against the yardstick of popular opinion. She does not worry about whether she is liked or accepted. The deeper source, the knowing that she is whole, that she is enough. This is not arrogance, nor is it indifference to others. It is a recognition of the inherent value of being, of existing in the world as a complete individual and living authentically according to one's own truth. In truth, the woman with no friends is not devoid of connection. She is deeply connected to herself, and in that connection she is connected to the universe. There is a profound relationship between the individual and the cosmos, an intricate web of energy, life, and consciousness that binds us all. The woman who walks alone understands this connection intuitively. She does not need the validation of others because she is already a part of the greater whole. She is not an isolated island, but a being whose essence is woven into the fabric of existence itself. This recognition brings with it a sense of peace. It brings a sense of calm that is rarely found in the busyness of social exchanges and external distractions. The woman with no friends is free to explore the depths of her thoughts, to dive into the mysteries of her own existence. She does not need the noise of the world to tell her who she is or what she should do. Instead, she listens to the quiet voice within her that speaks of purpose, meaning, and truth. She allows the world to unfold around her without needing to control it, to manipulate it, or to define it through the lens of social validation. In this sense, the woman with no friends is often more connected to reality than those who are constantly engaged in relationships. She is free from the illusion that social connections are the key to happiness. She understands that true contentment lies not in the presence of others, but in the acceptance of oneself. She is the embodiment of the realization that happiness is an inside job, something that comes from within, not from external sources. But this is not a rejection of others. It is a recognition that the deepest and most meaningful connections are the ones we build within ourselves. Only when we are whole on our own can we truly be open to connecting with others in an authentic way. The woman with no friends may choose to interact with others, but she does so not out of necessity, not because she needs to be validated, but because she genuinely enjoys the experience of being with others. She seeks out relationships not from a place of lack, but from a place of abundance. True friendship, the woman with no friends understands, is not about dependency or filling a void. It is about mutual growth, about supporting each other in the journey of self-discovery. It is not a contract of obligation, but a choice to engage with another from a place of wholeness, of equality. She does not seek out friends to complete her. She seeks them to enrich her life and to share in the experience of being alive. In this way, the woman with no friends is not lonely. She is at peace with herself. She does not need others to define her, to validate her, or to make her feel worthy. She already knows her worth. She knows that true fulfillment comes not from the approval of others, but from the deep understanding of her own existence. To be a woman with no friends is not a tragedy. It is a state of freedom, of autonomy, and of deep inner peace. It is a state that many would do well to embrace. For in learning to stand alone, we come to know who we truly are, free from the masks, the expectations, and the distractions that the world often places upon us. It is only when we learn to walk alone that we can fully appreciate the beauty and richness of life, and the quiet, unshakable strength that lies in being true to ourselves. This kind of self-relationship, which might appear foreign or even uncomfortable to some, is a rich and transformative experience. It is not a static state, but one that grows and deepens over time. The woman with no friends often finds herself in an ongoing dance with her inner world, constantly evolving and redefining her relationship with herself. This process can be messy, filled with moments of doubt and vulnerability, but it is also one of immense power and liberation. When a person spends time alone, free from the pressure of social expectations, they are gifted the space to confront their own inner workings. There is no one else to mirror their insecurities, no external standards to measure up to. What is left is an encounter with the self that is raw, unfiltered and honest. This can be an intimidating experience for many, for it forces one to look inward, to face the parts of ourselves that we have long ignored or suppressed. The woman with no friends has made peace with this inner confrontation. She knows that only by facing her own shadows can she step into the fullness of her light. And it is through this intimate relationship with herself that she finds a deeper connection to the world around her. Though she may not rely on friends for validation, the woman with no friends is not isolated in the traditional sense. She exists in a state of deep connection to all that is. She can walk through a crowded street, sit in a bustling cafe, or listen to a conversation without needing to engage. Her awareness, her attention, is not divided by the need for approval or social participation. She is simply present, engaged in the world without needing to own it or control it. In many ways, this detachment from the need for social engagement makes her more available to the world. She can listen with more clarity, observe with more depth, and experience life with a richer sense of presence. The woman who walks alone is capable of seeing beauty in the smallest of moments. Because she is not distracted by the noise of her own needs or desires, she is able to recognize the interconnectedness of all things, the subtle threads that link her to the world. This perspective allows her to transcend the limitations of small, fragmented relationships. whereas friendships in conventional terms often come with baggage. Expectations, demands, and sometimes subtle power struggles. The woman with no friends is free from these complexities. She is able to observe relationships from a distance, understanding them for what they truly are without the overlay of her own projections or needs. She is no longer seeking validation through others, but instead can approach each interaction with the fullness of her own being, without expectations or attachments. The woman who chooses solitude understands that true intimacy is not dependent on external relationships, but on the depth of one's connection to oneself. She has learned the art of being with herself in a way that few others ever truly learn. It is an intimate dance, a conversation of sorts, where every thought, every feeling, every movement becomes an opportunity for reflection, growth, and self-awareness. But this solitude is not an escape. It is not about avoiding the world or withdrawing from it. Instead, it is about engaging with the world from a place of total freedom. The woman with no friends is not running away from relationships. She is simply not letting them define her. Her relationships, when they do come, are born from a place of understanding, balance, and equality. She does not expect others to fulfill her emotional needs, nor does she offer herself to others as a source of emotional validation. Her connections are built on mutual respect and shared understanding, not on the need to fill an emotional void. There is a certain kind of wisdom that comes with this level of emotional independence. The woman with no friends understands that no person, no matter how close, can ever truly complete her. She is already whole. And while relationships can be beautiful and enriching, they are not the source of her fulfillment. This realization allows her to experience relationships in a much more profound way. She can give freely to others without the fear of depletion, knowing that her well-being does not depend on others. In the absence of close friendships, she is also free to engage with people without the weight of social obligation. There is no pressure to fit into a role or maintain a certain image. She can simply be herself in her entirety without fear of judgment or the need for approval. This freedom allows her to experience others more authentically, unencumbered by the baggage of expectations or roles. She is not looking to control the interaction, to mold it into something that fits her needs. Instead, she approaches others as they are in their own authenticity, without the need for change. In this sense, the woman with no friends transcends the ordinary concept of friendship. She is not rejecting relationships, but instead approaching them from a place of radical self-sufficiency. She does not need others to fulfill her. She offers herself freely with no strings attached. This is the essence of true freedom. To give of oneself without expecting anything in return, to engage with the world from a place of deep self-awareness and inner peace. This is not to say that the woman with no friends does not face loneliness at times. There are certainly moments when she feels the sting of solitude, when the desire for human connection rises within her. But even in those moments, she understands that loneliness is not a permanent state. It is a temporary feeling, a wave that comes and goes. She has learned to ride those waves, to allow them to pass without allowing them to define her. She knows that the feeling of loneliness is simply a reflection of her temporary separation from her true nature. In the moments when loneliness arises, the woman with no friends does not seek to escape it, but instead welcomes it as a teacher. She allows herself to sit in the discomfort of being alone, knowing that in this space something profound is happening. She is being given the opportunity to deepen her relationship with herself. She is being invited to explore new dimensions of her inner world, to stretch the boundaries of who she is, to learn more about the fullness of her existence. Through this process, the woman with no friends comes to a deep understanding of what it means to be truly alive. She is not defined by external circumstances, nor by the relationship she does or does not have. She is, in her essence, an expression of life itself, an individual consciousness, a being who is deeply connected to the universe in ways that transcend the limitations of human connection. In this way, the woman with no friends represents a model of self-sufficiency that is increasingly rare in a world that places so much importance on external relationships. Her life is a testament to the truth that true happiness does not come from others, but from the internal recognition of one's own wholeness. It is a message of freedom, of independence, and of self-awareness, a message that invites all of us to explore the depths of our own being and find peace within ourselves, regardless of the world around us. As she walks through life alone but not lonely, the woman with no friends is a beacon of what it means to live authentically. She has no need for approval, no need to fit in. She stands in the truth of who she is, a woman who has found her own way and chosen to live. This is the ultimate freedom. The freedom to be oneself, fully, without apology,